So what we're taking a look at today is ZG by Automaton, released in 2001, and unfortunately that was kind of the end of it. There were some issues due to, some things in September that kind of didn't go too well for this company. Basically, they lost a distributor, and that kind of ended it. Now, there's a couple of really cool factors to it. As you can see right up here, it says the action figure trading card game. So, ambitious to say the least. This is done. Uh, this was a new company from the designer Vampire the Masquerade, and that guy made a lot, and still does make RPGs and stuff like that. And you'll see as I go into the explanation of this that that's essentially what this kind of is. It takes a lot of weird angles, and in my opinion, comes together in a great product. Let's take a look at kind of what we're looking at. So these ones that are obviously color coded, those are the stock figures. Now, the parts can be interchanged, and if you see these stands, these are action figure, posable stands. I do it just for, art's sake. The pieces are completely interchangeable. They are highly articulate, which of course is good. They can stand on their own, but when it comes to like the kneeling position, whatever, that's why I have the stands. They are very, very heavy, in terms of the plastic. This was, during a time when plastic was not that expensive. See our discussions on how Hecatomb and Redikai had some issues too. But for example, take my favorite of the three, the Armada figure. You can see it is a really awesome sculpt. This effectively is if you want to call it a gladiatorial game. It has rules for 2 to 4, but realistically, it can be played with any number of people. You have elbow joint, you have wrist joint, shoulder joint, neck joint, multi-section, joints on the legs, even with a twist of the thigh for posability. And all these, as I hit the cam, the pieces are removable because as you add the term is slag, obviously destroy the piece, you're supposed to remove them. Now, obviously, in reality, we generally just leave the pieces on because some of these, like the arm cans or whatever, are a little bit of a pain to get on and off, fast. So let's go real quick. This is a very, very brief overview. I'm not trying to give you the full game, but there were two versions. There is the one that came with the blister card, and they all had, this is all the same card. There was nothing on the front outside showing the figure, and they all came with this player mat. Now this player mat is it's a pretty big size when you see it. I'll try and get it in the shot. So as you can see, and it says right there, that's basic rules, and it gives you, it's pretty well detailed and a good bit of visual. And then on the back of Pure Insanity on just blue on white, that is the advanced game. And if you're thinking that looks like a lot of rules, I'm going to tell you it is. You're not wrong. And it's not in a bad way. It is in a very creative way to essentially gamify gladiatorial combat. Now, as we talk about in Ophidian and a couple other games that have to deal with gladiators and that arena combat thing, this one's a lot harder to manage a team as one person, because there are timing aspects, there are movement aspects, and for you to try and do all that, you would turn this more or less into a miniatures game as opposed to the blistering fast pace of it. When you get one of these, obviously my cards are in sleeves, so I gotta adjust for the glare. You get 10 cards. One is your character card. Let's see if I can get that. There you go. Has some skills, and these are 2 abilities. And then you get your basic weapons. What's interesting about these 10 cards, there is a booster pack for all this. These don't appear in the booster pack, which is actually, in my opinion, good marketing. It means you're not going to get the cards you already have by buying the boosters, so I think that's pretty good. But you'll get, all of them have, as you can see, 1 arm mounted weapon. And let's see if I can get it here. So this one says arm gun. So of course all types. Impulse is basically like the speed of the weapon, movement points, range of the weapon, and you measure that, as some games will later do, in card lengths. So like that would be 2 card lengths, and you can move that around. And then this one doesn't have any text. You'll notice these weird symbols. Well, when I shoot, I say, okay, I'm going to use this gun. I choose which side I want to use. The opponent would flip over the top card of the deck, spin it, and it would land, and we go there, and we flip it over, and we go to see, if I can get this thing off the ground, which things line up. Now here, nothing really lines up. except I have this arrow, which is armor piercing. That asterisk is explosion. Here is armor. So, example, we're here. The arrow would beat the armor piercing. The explosion would be absorbed by the armor. And these two don't match, so I'd only have like one hit. It really wouldn't do much. But if I had something more like, say, that, I would have a match 1, 2, and the arrow would be 3. I would have what's called strikes, and that would be 3 points, and that would be enough to slag the piece of gear that I'm attacking. The goal of this is to, if you're lucky enough to destroy your opponent's ulster, think just like the body, or to get them down to 3 cards or less in their deck. Because at the beginning of every round, you search your deck to find the 3 cards you want to use for the round. That's really cool. This game, the basic game at least, your actual your Z gear, everything has the futures, the Z in front of it. Your Z gear deck, you don't draw from your Z gear deck for the most part. You search out the pieces you want to use, play them, that sort of stuff, and it really allows you a lot of freedom, which I think is very good. Let's just kind of go through. So the ulster, you can see this has all sorts of abilities. ZG, so if you play this card, you can move up and down freely, and I'll cover movement in a sec. You can kind of get a hint at it here. Laser, it has another ability, 2 abilities, and the headgear. This has no range, no movement, so this usually is like sort of an assist card. The combat claw, move of that, range. Now, when they start talking range, they mean of the actual piece. So if I wanted to use the claw, it would be if that claw could be within touching range of the opposing unit, which, that leads some of itself to some of these tricky things, but also it means your, movement, there we go, words. Movement is very important, placement's very hard, and you even actually have a left and a right foot, so you can even mix and match the gear. Sorry, the glare is really bad. I'll move them over here. So, actually, let me adjust the brightness on this. There we go, for a second. So I'm showing you these. Now, what's interesting is, like, for example, so we compare our speeds. You're going first. If I had this stuff in my hand, I could play this to use the dodge ability. Now, I can't use it for attack later, but I can use it to play and use it for the dodge. Using reflex, double my impulse, because what you do is when you get your hand, you basically figure out your numbers. You go highest to lowest. So my impulse would be 652, and if yours is lower than that, then I go first, which includes placing my stuff first, but then also moving first. And then we do that again next round. Like every time, we actually will move our figures from a start position no further away than 7 cards away from your opponent. Now, we have some cool stuff as I keep bouncing that camera. So that was the basic game. Now, when we get into the advanced game, which is what comes in the booster packs, things get nutty. These characters, so we have a Mercenary, the Vanguard, and the Armada. Those characters are 0 points. Now, if you use a character card, you don't use a mode deck. Well, that comes up, well, what's a mode deck? The mode deck is where the RPG elements start to come in. You make a deck, and this would example this, I believe this is the deck. Yeah, so instead of my character, I would have this guy, the Orbital. He has all these abilities. He gives these skills. That comes up. Now I'm going to turn the card. That is credit 40. You generally going to get 600 credits to make your deck with your unit points. So that's where the cool RPG aspect of building your deck but having requirements. It's just not having all the good cards. It's you got to fit into 600 points. Now, this is a syndic. Basically, they're just like part of you. Like they're part of your network. Let's try and lower our... There we go. So that's like I would be part of the Orbital and the I say zero. It's actually null foundation. So I would have both these in my deck, and it gives me all these abilities. And of course, what RPG would be complete without flaws? Now, those flaws give you points back, meaning you can build your deck even fatter or richer, depending which way you want to look at it. And when these things come up, they have to be played, and they usually give detrimental abilities. Some you can get around, like some will make you extremely aggressive. Some are like, look, if you attack and you get no hits, you might slag your gear. But if you're playing a rush style deck, that doesn't matter. Now, these are maneuvers. This is kind of like the reason that you care about all these buzzwords, keywords, everything else. So he gives one instance of command, one instance of pilot, one instance of stealth. She gives alertness, engineer, gunnery, marshal Z, savvy, and stealth. That's a lot of words, right? Well, for each word, you can have one copy of any card with that keyword. So, because I have maneuver, I have alertness. So I'm only allowed to have, one of those. That's one command. That's one engineer, one gunnery, one marshal Z, one pilot, one savvy, one stealth. Now, they're both stealth, but they're different words, so that counts. Their cost on these is, like 3 credits, whatever. So that's minimal because you have to spend so much actually getting the access to the keywords. And then this was a custom deck. It's not mine. Actually, it's from the website. They put up sample decks, so good for them. This is one of the superior. So the bodies come in 4 types: state-of-the-art, prototype, standard, and it's all of them. And obviously costs accordingly. The prototypes can usually have a lot of different stuff going on. There's ZG2, that's double armor piercing. It has all these abilities going on. It costs 90, so that's a bit much. Chain gun, that is the gun from this guy. He's probably going to fall over when I put him down. That's what the stand is for. And the buckler, so that's from them. Recoilless rifle, that is the superior version. The prototype armor, all prototypes have something called jam, which is why their cost is less and they have wonky abilities. But if you don't score any matches, you can't play it again next turn. But this has parry 3, so it even has counter-striking built in. That's the backpack, but that's the superior version. So this guy can zoom up to 7 cards away, and depending how many cards I zoom, I might be able to hit for a freak ton. And then, again, it's a prototype with all sorts of icons and everything else. Now, as one would imagine, all these icons and keywords and everything else, and I can just tell you I've read if you can call it the rules or whatever, every time I have to explain this game, I have to read it like twice before I sit down to teach someone. Because the basic game, this game is fine. This game is basically played with rules you can almost find on the back of the package. When you start to customize your character, that's where stuff gets, in my opinion, just awesome. Because there's so much that can be done. But at the same time, you have to kind of, admit that as an RPG designer, a lot of RPG elements went into it. So here's another one of them. She has something called a load, which special units can have, and it gives you all these special things. Like this one's for front gear, and it does all this other stuff, and of course it costs points. Here are the drive cards. So instead of having extra syndics or whatever, maybe you'll have these ones, because you can start with up to one of these in play, and they give you certain accessible abilities. A bunch of flaws, bunch of, not too many maneuvers. So you can see 4 maneuver cards, which is fine, but the drives and everything else just to make you better as you keep going. The art, in my opinion, well, especially for the gear is very sharp, very clean lines, that sort of stuff. Let's see if I can find the final card type worth talking about. There it is. There it is. Okay, so there is also, as with RPGs, there are terrain. Now, this card would actually go on literally any object you'd bring in. You'd put this card face down on there, and whoever would approach it, stand on it, the term would be interact with it. We'll flip it over, and then we need to explain everything that does. What's interesting, they cost money as well. So you are actually also buying terrain to bring with you. And it does all sorts of fun stuff and everything else. And it really is. You want to, as they kind of recommend, more box your objects. Because when you measure the size of an object, you would just measure it with cards. So this would be a 2 by like 1 by pretty much a 1. And that matters for the sake, because some of these things talk about mass. Some of them talk about, the size of stuff. If you can think it in this game, you almost can do it. And that's really cool, but that's also very, very overwhelming, because there's also, I will try to go and keep this short, but I'm trying to find them here. They call tactics. You can go into stances at the cost of some of your movement points, and they give bonuses. I mean, we start talking about cover fire, sneak attacks. We talk about the height advantage. just all sorts of stuff. And again, I give the designer full credit. It has so many cool ideas going on. And as far as this thing having survived, if it wasn't for, 9/11, 2001, I couldn't tell you. There were plans, in fact, for a second expansion to come out. So at the very least, the funding, it would appear, was already in place to have this thing go on. There was talk about, like, this one might be my better chance. Talk about clip-on, like, shoulder pieces. Like, nothing right now goes on this notch, but apparently there was talk of that. Obviously, there would be more weapons. Like, apparently every pack was going to come with one weapon, a card that went with the weapon, and then, like, 3 other cards or something like that. So there would have been card-only booster packs, which is the Citizen Z. That's where all this stuff comes from. And then there were the blister packs, which were how you got your figures. Right now, there's only 3. I did not see any research to suggest that there was going to be a 4th. While I'm talking, I'll get up some of the other models you can kind of see. I'll get him off the stand. But there was, because, for example, there are... his chest piece fell off because of that. So you can see the little 2 holes right there to mount that. While it's softer plastic, this stuff is very thick. It's very durable. I'll give them that. And, buzzwords abound. Like, here's a claw. You literally it actually fits a figure in there because this guy can grapple. This backpack has what's called a zone weapon, which is, so there's 3 kinds of weapons. There's melee, so if you can see the sword here, there's gun, and then there are other weapons. Like this, for example, is actually a back gear. It's not considered a gun, but it is a zone weapon. It fires like a huge, pulse laser, whatever. So, that's your, if you want to call it a rock, paper, scissors balance, but I can tell you just from having played and dug into the rules to make sure I'm not misrepresenting and to truly understand the game, this isn't just rock, paper, scissors. This is combat on a level that most games took a while to get to this level. For example, Mech Warrior never hit this. Mage Knight kind of, between the relics and swapping stuff around, had a little bit of customization. But the fact that you're actually using an action figure, the fact that you have a card game to go with it, and it has so many abilities. You have the mix and match. You have the movement, the terrain advantage. Everything on this game is utterly awesome. Now, as far as the creation and everything else, these action figures were sold basically in KB Toys, that sort of thing. I can't find anything to say there was an exclusivity or anything like that, but that's where they were coming from. They were at Gen Con 2000. Were they at 2001? They were one of the game and toy shows or conventions. They were there. They did run some tournaments. There are tournament rules. There are league rules, like where showing up. Sorry about the shake. I'll take my hand off the table. But there were league rules about stuff like, every time you play, you get 1 point. A win is worth like 2 additional points. So the next time you play, you might have, instead of 600 points, your next week of league or however times you meet, you'll have 603. And for some, that can be a difference between adding a different maneuver or upgrading from, say, standard to superior gear, certain things like those. And so, like 1 week, you might get 3 points, you might get 6. That won't add up. You get to like 20 points, you're making leaps and bounds in swapping out technology and everything else. For the fact that these are all the parts, they each came, and then you do have mixing, matching, like I showed you with this, he's got some of the green parts on him. And because you have 9 cards worth of parts in each figure, that's 27 to start with, and each of those has another 3 permutation variations on top of that, you're looking at like 81 or so. I'm sure my math is terrible, like 80 plus different parts. And that's not taking into the fact of how you create your mode deck, how you create your character. There is so much customization, so I feel confident even saying that for a game that didn't survive due to unfortunate circumstances, and some were citing the marketing wasn't great because these were being sold in Toy Store versus the true hobby gamer, but that's a different argument. But the customization, all the options presented, this thing has roots. It has the ability to be picked up and played right now. 20 years later, it's still good. It's still viable. This is another aspect of RPG influencing, a card game, and in my opinion, doing so in a positive way, if not overwhelming. But that's in and of itself, that's its own thing. I wish there was more awesome history. I've tried reaching out to the designer a few times over the years, and I just can't seem to get hold of him to, get comment on, well, basically, literally anything about the game, whether it was its future, whether it was what is actually accomplished, that sort of stuff. The stuff on archive.org does give a glimpse that they were prepared to go in. There was, ways to register a tournament. You could register and then run demos and like get points for what, I don't know. There was never, what the reward actually was. We didn't really cover that, but it has all the right markers to be something amazing. But I'll leave it at that. So if you enjoy this commentary rather, like, share, subscribe to the video, to our channel. Let other people know that we're doing these deep dives into games you might not have known existed, and I call them forgotten and forsaken because this has fallen to the wayside. It's not talked about. Even the sites that did talk about it, those sites are gone because it's been 20 years. If you want to help drive what we do next, go to patreon.com/cardboardresurrection, all one word. And we have two tiers right now. One is general access. You'll get early access to videos like this, our history videos, our discussion videos. But at the next tier, the citizen influencer tier, you have the ability to vote in the polls, and those polls determine what we play next, what we acquire next, what we talk about next, topic-wise as well as game-wise. It gives a lot of direction based on your feedback, and when we get enough members in that tier, I'm going to start doing giveaways. We have so much product that we've acquired through our various deals and everything else, and I want to go to people that are going to play it. We have over 50 games right now to go through, and we just need to keep trucking through it. So keeping hold of this stuff is not something I desire. I'm not looking to hoard. I'm looking to play. I'm looking to record. I'm looking to get this information back out there. So until next time, this is Cardboard Resurrection, and if you've got, any great stories, if you join our Patreon, I will absolutely, interact with you about stories, everything else. You want to leave comments in the comments for the YouTube videos, fantastic. We don't monetize on YouTube. That's why I plug the Patreon every time. I don't want anyone to feel like that this content, that we need to make money off of this. The money helps, but it's not why we're doing it. So until next time, Cardboard Resurrection, we will talk to you again.